Bless you. Okay, if you notice on the website, I have made a couple of changes. You will find the recording listed like this. It'll say Zoom recording Tuesday, September 20th, and maybe a brief description about what chapters we covered. I am not really trying to set up Zoom meetings so that you can join me online, because I really want you in here, okay? I mean, really. If you have excused absences, then certain, but other than that, as I said before, I want you here. So, I have going to do what I can to stick through the rest of the schedule, and so I still have the second test for October 17th when we come back from campus, or come back after the fall break. In the meantime, we will have our first group assignment, position paper, and it's this one on vertical integration and electric vehicles. So, what is a position paper? I asked that question initially before. So let us first bring up this slideshow and we will discuss it. That should say electric vehicles, so ignore that first part. So these slides basically, once again, reintroduce you to the concept of what vertical integration is. The position papers usually will have something to do with the chapters that we're working on at any one time. The position papers you will do as a group activity, and you will create it together with your group, all right? Use Zoom if you need to be able to get your groups together. I do not know if you know this, but each one of you as a student has a professional license to Zoom. Theoretically, you could use the 500 individual version. You could set up your own conference if you wanted to. You have that much control over it. I'm not sure if you actually knew that, but while you're in class, use it. It's the best you can get. So what I'm going to first do is this. I'm going to kind of guide you through how to consider thinking of the position paper. And so we're going to talk about the basic concepts that we have again. So vertical integration, as we talked about, is when one organization does all the work: production, sales, inventory, credit. And as we look at these are the same notes that we have from our slides, you can either do it forward or downstream, in which a manufacturer decides that they're going to integrate the entire distribution structure in their work, or you can be a distributor or retailer who decides to sell their own branded equipment or product, or take someone else's product and change it in such a way that it's used for a unique purpose. And once again, outsourcing is a definition that says when an organization decides to buy the services from a third party. Once again, folks, the decision always you start with is the buy position. The buy position is where you start from and you justify whether or not you're actually going to do the vertical market thing. So as I Set on one end, buy is the endpoint, every function is outsourced, the manufacturer distributor arrangement. There's no sharing, no distinctions, no continuity. And of course, as I've said before, the quasi-vertical or quasi-vertical, if you wish, implies a compromise in which the channel members have a close and committed relationship, and they make sure that that they're taking care of each other's business at the same time. The relational governance also is the consideration that you have your partners in mind when you're coming up with structures like this. And so we talked about the costs and benefits, the costs in that decision. Manufacturer assumes all the distribution costs, but the benefit that the manufacturer has is they have control over how that brand is executed and used, and hopefully all of the good properties, things that happen, are directly reflected back to the manufacturer. And so without further ado, we're going to take this idea and we're going to talk about electric vehicles. So electric vehicles is not a brand new item. Certainly, we all know this. General Motors is about to come out with an entire class of electric vehicles, starting from the Volt of the least all the way up to their trucks. Now, for those of you who are a little fuzzy on the inherent differences of electric vehicles, let's first talk about how they work. They have very few moving parts. Electric vehicles, the few moving parts that they have tend to be the wheels, tend to be the steering wheels themselves, but basically an electric vehicle is a practically solid state vehicle. Ironically, the only thing that's not solid state is the batteries. The batteries are a liquid state battery, and there's always been interesting speculation with Toyota why they haven't come up with an electric vehicle, because they're trying to come up with a solid state lithium battery. I could go into conversation for hours about the different battery technologies, but Toyota is in my mind, the number one manufacturer of automobiles in the world. They sell 30 million every year. They must be doing something right. And they have not jumped completely in the electric vehicle bandwagon. And I think it has to do with the fact that they're looking for a dry state lithium battery versus liquid. Now, what difference does that make? A liquid state lithium battery like you have right now, the purity of the lithium is practically has to be to 6 significant figures in order for lithium batteries to survive, okay? It's a very unique technology. You also find that with electric vehicles, they tend less to be mechanics as they tend to be software specialists and engineers. I don't know if you know this, but like the Tesla battery structure as it is, it's set up to only charge up to 85 to 90% of battery power. Why? Well, the reason being is that to charge a lithium battery to 100% of its max to 100% to maximum erodes the lithium battery lifespan. And so there's an interesting discussion when a year and a half ago in California, when they had one of their yearly burnings, the Tesla factory sent out a broadcast to the cars in California to extend their battery life another 15%, which, by the way, is an option. You can pay for that. You already have it. It pre-exists within the batteries themselves, but you got to pay for that as an extra. I don't know if you know that. We're also coming, by the way, I can have this whole conversation on the future of automobiles right now. We're coming up to a state now where everything that you have in a vehicle is subscription. Did you know that there's a subscription fee for heated seats in BMWs in Europe? Okay. Yes. Yes. Yeah. Isn't that amazing? It's very useful. Yeah, and it is a unique distinction, and it it flies in the face directly with, I bought the vehicle, I have that ability, I've got to pay for hot seats, you know what I mean? Depending on the different models that you have, we're going to a subscription-based service. The future for electric vehicles, what I see happening is it's called the skateboard model, by the way, in that you'll actually buy your vehicle, the electric vehicle, but you'll lease the batteries at the bottom. And so, like battery technology, after 3.5 to 4 years starts to degrade, but what you'll be able to do is trade out the skateboard, which you're leasing, and just take that body and put it on top of another, which you can do in the electric vehicle. All right. The single biggest part is the battery on electric vehicles. And so that's the single piece that needs to be changed. Now, because of this, over 50% of the revenue that is generated at an average automobile place is in service. All right. So what happens to service in the electric vehicle world? And that's the question that you have to ask. So this is the premise that you will be writing on and stating whether you agree with it or whether you disagree with it. So the premise is electric vehicles, not hybrids, but vehicles with no internal combustion engine, have the greatest chance for success being sold in a vertical market. So what do you do with a position paper? In your group, you will take this premise and you will decide whether or not absolutely you agree with it or absolutely you disagree with it. There's no batting back and forth. On the other hand, you strongly believe it one way or another, and you are going to convince me which one is right and which one is not. So how do you take this and come up with an answer? So this is what, or a way to do it in your groups. So electric vehicles have the greatest chance for success being sold in the vertical market. Now, this is what's known as a declarative statement. And semantically, when you get one of these statements like this and you're trying to decide whether you believe it or not, the way to look at this is to look at it in one phrase at a time, okay? And so look at it this way. The statement actually breaks down into 3 different phases. Electric vehicles have the greatest chance for success being sold in the vertical market. This is what's known as a conjunction, a conjunctive statement, where you have 3 different parts. And for the whole thing to be true, you've got to have every single part of the statement be true. If you are talking in terms of computers, this would be known as a Boolean statement. So this and this and this have to be true for the whole statement to be true. So in your groups, when you're deciding whether or not you agree with this statement, all you have to do to not agree with it is to make one of these statements false. Do you believe that the greatest chance for success is not in the vertical market, but maybe in a traditional market? Then this statement is false. Do you believe that the vertical market covers everything, gives it the greatest chance of success? Then you agree with it. Do you believe that electric vehicles have no chance whatsoever? This is how you break this statement down. And so in your groups, when you're coming up with this idea, you're going to decide to break this statement down into its smallest pieces and decide whether or not you agree with it. You believe, yes, electric vehicles have a great chance in the vertical market, but maybe not the best chance. You perhaps may believe that the greatest chance of success is when it's broadly sold in every single kind of automobile dealership. And that not just the vertical market. And so these are the ways that you break it down. And so what is the format that I wish for you to do in your group? You'll take it as a group and you'll create a paper supporting or not supporting the premise. And I'm going to have one group present a 5-minute clip, 5 to 10 minutes. And do not have to produce a paper, just the slides, and I'll use the slides to grade you. So one group presents, the other groups create a paper. Every group will give a presentation during the semester, okay? So the format, if you're producing the paper, 600 words, no more. That roughly comes down to 2 to 3 pages. And that doesn't include a bibliography. Research and a bibliography gets you a higher grade. Library.appstate.edu, doing research on electric vehicles and their success. If you show me a couple of 3 sources in your work, you get better grades. It's as simple as that. Yes?
You're saying you want a bibliography, you don't?
I want a bibliography. Well, let's just say this.
When it's not.
I apologize.
No.
A bibliography might be optional, but a bibliography gets you better grade. Okay? The grade is shared equally. So the whole group gets a 92, each individual gets a 92.
When is it due?
This will be due October 10th. So you got a couple of weeks to go. Yeah. Source that you just use? I would prefer, well, you know what? Even magazine articles I think are worthy. So if you have journal articles, that's great. Magazine articles are good too. Yes.
For the position, if you want us to go take a position without researching, you decide you want to research
That's a good question. I think it depends on your own group dynamics. If, you know, usually in most groups, there's 2 or 3 individuals who might have a strong reason why. I suggest that when you do a group, you look at it and take a straw vote. You know, in other words, does anybody feel like, you know, can we just cut to the chase and say, this is what we think? All right. I have no problem if you have a knee-jerk reaction and say, no, it ain't going to work, and then justify it. I have no problem with that. What I'm more concerned is, I want you to come up with a good argument one way or another. And the truth is, one group can be completely against it, and one of you can be completely for it. And you could both have 95s or 90s. It just depends on how well you argue. I think that's more important to me. I don't, whatever your position is, I'm good with it either way. Oh, I will email your groups out again. We did groups, when we did our paper. When you worked on the calculation, that was your group members. I will go ahead and send those out again, okay? I will send them out, each group, and I will send out your group's email addresses so that we touch base on that again, okay? Yes.
Vertical means that I'm thinking.
Yeah.
Company manufactures all the cars.
Right. Well, even more than that, vertical market means in essence, you own it from beginning to end. I not only manufacture the goods, but I deliver the goods. My individuals install the goods. My individuals maintain the goods. In other words, there's no horizontal market. It doesn't go out to a wholesaler or a retailer. I own the channels from cradle to grave.
That doesn't mean you have to know that. You don't have to make the wheel bearings, you can buy those.
Right. Exactly.
I buy
Yeah.
one this morning,
Yeah, exactly.
$400.
Yeah, you own the market. It's as simple as that. Now, even the most vertical of markets can have contractors because the vertical markets are making make or buy decisions as well. But it's the consumer is the ultimate one who decides whether a vertical market is truly vertical. If I only consider that there's one manufacturer for this good, as far as I'm concerned, it's a vertical market. All right. This doesn't include franchises or value-added resellers, which there are distinct differences. All right. The vertical market means you're from beginning to end. I'll decide. I'll go from group A through G. So there may be a time when two groups present at the same time, present the same thing, maybe even has the same logic. I'm fine with it. All right. Pardon me. I will send those out this week. And the first group will know clearly ahead. And the first group, it's like the first test. I'm always very kind with people. The first group, I'm always very kind because you're kind of setting what the standards are anyway. Okay. Okay. All right. So this is the basics of it. The basic format of it. Now, let me just talk about the way that I like to see. Oh, I'll show you how to do sources. I just thought of that. So the format, this is the way I want you to do it. I want you to start the paper with the premise. Oops, excuse me. Under that, the next paragraph, I want you to say, or you can take the premise and say, we do not believe electric vehicles have the greatest chance for success being sold in the vertical market. It's the first statement that you make, yes or no. Then the rest of the paper, I want your justification for that reason. All right. Yes, vertical markets, it's the only chance for success. You can also use that as saying that vertical markets are the only chance for success because the traditional markets simply have no place for electric vehicles. You can use that as an argument as well. All right. So, statement, your belief, yes or no, and then the remaining part of it is your justification. The more facts, the higher grade. Simple as that. So, I was asked, or we had this conversation about how do you do the bibliography. Let me show y'all a fairly easy way to do a bibliography. It can be yes, I would like it in APA style, and I'm going to show you an easy way to do it. Okay. So For those of you who decide to go through getting a PhD and have 10 pages of bibliography, can you understand the nightmare of trying to do that alphabetically? So let me show you a quick way. So when you go into Word, there's this thing at the top that says References. I want you to click on that. And if you notice this middle part where it says Managed Sources, the style Chicago, I've got a couple of journal sources that I want to use. I want to create a bibliography. So within Word, the same document that I'm doing this paper with, I click Manage Sources. Now, if you notice, I've already got a couple in there, which is kind of cool. It saves them. So let's just say I want to come in and create new ones. So within Word, I look for a journal article, and let's just put in a couple of names. Last name, first. I can also flip those around if I need to move them up or down. And so there's my authors. So that's the title of my journal article. And let's say the name of the journal. Couple of things, if your pages are always extremely important in the bibliography, generally make sure those are always correct. The modern bibliographies now go to volumes and issues, so you have to click on that to get to this part, okay? And so if you notice now, there's this listing in my current list. So let's just say I happen to be building these up. So I'm going to copy this over. And now I'm going to close. So I've got a bibliography. I've got two lists. How do I get it into my paper? I do bibliography, insert bibliography, and there it is. All done for you. Okay. Now, at this point, if you wanted to change the font, you can certainly go right ahead. Okay. Let's say you didn't want it in this Chicago, you wanted it in APA style. There it goes. It flips to APA style. Okay.
You have to have a summary. You have a summary for it.
Not for
Okay.
just the bibliography. Okay.
I'm doing a bibliography.
Oh, she's
We got, yeah.
She's-
Summary.
oh, she's tough as nails.
Yeah, yeah. Had her for 2 classes. She's great.
Yes. You have my sympathy. I'm kidding.
Has up a cool practice. Searching for articles. I found 11.
Good for you.
Yeah.
That's almost as many as she would want.
Well,
Yes, because she wants her pound of flesh. Excuse me. Anyway, so this is how you do bibliographies, folks. If you've been sweating over it for years, this is the easy way. And easy's good. I like easy. All right. This will switch from Chicago to APA and it'll alphabetize it for you. So by all means, use this as a tool. I finished classes and they say, you know, I've had students come back 5 years later and go, I don't remember a thing from your class except how to do a bibliography. So thanks, I guess. Okay, anyway. So we're all cool on that. The bibliography. Oh, you know, of course, how to do citations within work, right? So the citation is easy, you know, you would say Smith, comma, Julian 22. It will actually insert citations for you as well, all right? So this, of all the things that Word does, this may be the most useful thing it does and nobody ever talks about, to me, anyway. Especially when you're writing a lot of stuff. So we're all copacetic, we're all good? Good. Okay. So to help make sure that I don't jump ahead of myself early, I've planned out my classes. And we're going to talk a little bit more about this make or buy channel analysis. And we're going to talk about if buying is the best option for us, and it is our set position, then the next question we should have is, how do we pay for it? How do we pay for the buy option? Well, there's multiple ways in which organizations pay for the buy option. And it depends ultimately on the strength of the organizations and what the organizations have to give up, okay? So the first is margin. And this is the difference between the reseller's price, which we could also call the suggested retail price. Spit it out, Dave. The reseller's price and the cost of goods sold. So the cost of goods sold is what the reseller buys it for. And the reseller's price is exactly what it says. It's what the reseller sells it for. And so the reseller has the cost of what it is, and then they mark up a significant amount, hopefully sufficient enough to be able to make a reasonable profit, and that is how margin is, okay? Now, the cost of goods sold and the suggested retail price have always been something that is not fixed in stone. I am one of those individuals who's never been good at bargaining. Or my bargaining is usually, I'll give you one price and I'll walk away. Quite simply, I'm not a good arguer, all right? It's not in me. I wish I was better. Dr. Albinson, she's an ace. I let her do everything because quite simply, she's better at it than I am, all right? I take care of the kids. So anyway, don't tell her I might. Anyway, so the cost of goods sold between the two. Now, the interesting thing about the reseller's price or the suggested retail price is that the suggested retail price is always suggested. There's nothing fixed in stone. There are many automobiles, especially now, that are being sold at much higher than suggested retail price. In 1984, when Chevrolet released the newest version of the Corvette Stingray, it was a major modification. It was a V12 engine, and the suggested retail price was $52,000, and they were selling them in the area of $125,000, and they had an 18-month waiting list. There's a great story. I read this in a Jackson newspaper, Jackson, Mississippi. So there's an individual who was waiting on the list for 18 months and finally got the Corvette that he wanted in the exact package that he wanted, silver and black. It was everything that he wanted. And the next day he got a call from Eddie Murphy, the Eddie Murphy. And he said, "You got my car. That should have been my car, but they gave it to the wrong person." And they said, "Well, it's mine now." And he said, "All right, how much?" And the guy said 200,000. And he said, "I'll give you 175 and not a penny more." And he said, "Sold." So in one day, he made $50,000 on his car. That's just to let you know, suggested retail price is suggestion only. Your price may vary, all right? So that's margin. The commission is when you make a fraction of the retail price. And so an example might be, if I were to make a commission, and when I was selling computers, my commission was 6% of sales. And so I made, if I sold a computer system for $1,000, I would make $60 on that sale. It doesn't sound like much when you're talking about $1,000, but if you make a $100,000 sale, it's quite a bit of money. I sold to LSU at Eunice, I sold 45 units, and it was like a $90,000 sale. That was a great Christmas. I'll never forget it. But commission, it is a good way to be able to make substantial money, especially for the salespeople. But the difficulty of commission is it doesn't take in account to the cost of goods sold. So it means, in essence, is that you could drop your price to the floor and make nothing off of it. Back when Radio Shack was Radio Shack and I was selling with them, if they had any items that were obsolescent, in other words, phased out, they would guarantee you a 40% margin no matter what the cost of the goods were. So if you were a franchise store, it was a great way to work, okay? The last is royalty. And this is a percentage of the reseller's business. And so a royalty doesn't have to do with any individual corporation, but you're talking about a percentage of whatever the reseller makes, you make a particular margin. So when going back to Radio Shack as an example, if you were a store manager at Radio Shack, you got 3% of the entire store's profit, whatever that might be. And a store, you know, would average 150,000 to 200,000 a month. So it was a pretty decent check. Royalties also helped because it meant that the store managers could focus time on getting their salespeople up to speed, and it would allow them to make a commission, especially off of training, which was as important as anything else is. So these are the most common ways in which, if I wanted to buy my market channels, this is how I would have to pay for it. Now, those are the most obvious. Now, depending on how strong your corporation is, you may not have those as options. You might have a lump sum or a flat fee. And it's exactly what it says, okay? Lump sum or flat fee is a single price, regardless of effort. I should say cost, excuse me. because in the strictest term, it's a single cost. It also means that regardless of how well you do, then in essence, you continue on. And it can be something of a moral conundrum because it means that you're not invested in the future success of the company. And you do this with the promise and the hope that your purchase or engagement with this individual will bring its own reward to you. But it's a big risk. The next is what's called a functional discount. And the key word is functional. It means that you, in essence, are paid for the functions that you do. And so you're reimbursed for expenses in the production of work. The problem with this, of course, is there's a moral hazard of bill padding, right? That's exactly what bill padding is, where the tendency is to put everything on to an expense account, regardless of whether it has value connected with whatever you were doing or not, all right? You just have to be able to make sure that all of the payments that you make are justified. And the last is future consideration. And this is the rights to future business. Future considerations is the ultimate rolling of the dice. It's basically stating that you're willing to give your time and effort into something with only the hope that in the future you're going to do well. I do a Friday night radio show in Mississippi. It's for a scoreboard show for Friday Night Football. And I've done it for years now. I've worked with a friend of mine and I do it gratis. Where he was paying me at one time. I'm really invested in his success and I hope he does well. But what I've asked for is a 10 to 15% stake in it if he ever goes big. He's a good friend. I enjoy doing what I've been doing. I've been doing it for 20 years now. And so and it's investment in my time from like 11 to 1 a.m. in the morning when I'm putting up the scoreboard shows. I'm broadcasting on YouTube and Facebook. It's a lot of effort, but I like to have my feet in the door. I want to just keep doing it because in one way it's fun and you never know. I mean, crazier things have happened, all right? But future consideration is exactly what it sounds like. You're willing to give up something with the hope that it's bigger overall. Alec Guinness, Obi-Wan Kenobi, thought that Star Wars was silly. He never thought it would get anywhere. But he felt like he liked George Lucas. He liked the people that were there. They wanted him. And he decided for the heck of it, since they couldn't pay his normal salary of like $500,000 or whatever, he only took $50,000, but he wanted 5% of all future sales of Star Wars. So how does that work out? Alex Guinness's family has money into perpetuity for the rest of their existence. They have money beyond avarice is the word to use, right? From Star Trek 4, all right? But But the reason why is quite simply is he was willing to do this future consideration and he came out like gangbusters. So that's one of the ways that you can do it. Does future consideration work? Not all the time, but you're hoping that reciprocity, one good turn deserves another, that you will be reciprocated in your effort to try to keep these individuals successful. Does it always work? Not always. But you do it because it's fun, okay? So I'm going to touch on one more thing. It's going to be a little bit involved for about 10 minutes. But I think this last point is going to be important because in the make or buy channel options, whether you make or whether you buy, you're in business for one thing. And that is to increase your return on investment. ROI. ROI stands for return on investment. If you're a financial guru, if you're the average individual, the only reason you should be investing is for a higher return on investment. What it means is this, is that if I invest $1 and my future value for that investment is more than $1, then it pays for itself. So when you get out your financial calculator and you see I've got $1,000 investment and in 10 years it's going to yield me this amount of money and my net present value is greater than what I invested, you do the job. All right. The financial success is when you make more money than you invest. And that's what return on investment means. All right. It's the primary criteria that you do everything. And that's ultimately the reason why you're in business in the first place. So what does this mean? So you either have two things you want to increase. You either want to increase your revenues. You want to lower your direct cost. The direct costs are any costs associated in either the production or the delivery of a particular good. And when you subtract the cost from the revenues, this is what's known as the net effectiveness. How well did you do? If I spent $1,000 and I made $2,000, it means that I'm $1,000 in the black. Overhead is any amortized cost that is not directly associated with the production of goods. Overhead would be like the depreciation on plant and equipment, legal fees, the monthly power bill. All of those would be overhead. And so your purpose and your function, what you're looking to do, whether you're in the vertical integration, or whether you're doing the standard traditional structure, is you're trying to either reduce this number or increase that number. There's no differences in between. Okay? And so if I'm in the make or buy situation and my revenues are $10,000, regardless of whether I make it or I buy it, if it's cheaper for me to buy it versus make it, then I'm going to buy it. Now, there are two situations where, regardless of whether it is functionally better to vertically integrate or not, that might bar you from that, regardless of what it would do on your return on investment. And it might be that you just lack or can't obtain the resources necessary. In other words, you don't have the investment, perhaps in money or in plant and equipment. And so because of that reason, you can't invest in the vertical market. One of the things, of course, we always talk about is we all have limited resources, even though we might consider we have unlimited opportunities. And true market strategy is how do we best take the goods that we have or the assets we have and maximize our revenues. Right? If I can't obtain the resources to do that, then I don't have a choice. But it could also be that I have other priorities which contribute more to the return on investment and exhaust those capabilities. And the more I've read about Toyota, it's interesting because they were the first ones into the hybrid market, but it seems like they're going to be the last one into the electric vehicles. And I think that has to do with Toyota right now, higher priorities that they're working on right now besides doing electric vehicles. I've read they did some very fascinating work on hydrogen powered vehicles. I'm talking about hydrogen fuel cells. And I find it to be fascinating because, of course, hydrogen is inexhaustible. If they can figure that out, they've really got something going, okay? And so in the make or buy channel options, ultimately, it is how you work for success. But just remember that you have to be able to increase this above that. And hopefully you won't have these situations that will bar you, all right? You have three things that are relevant: revenue, direct costs, and overhead. And return on investment is that ratio. The only reason we're going in business is to increase our return on investment. Okay, I'm finished today. When we come back on Tuesday, we will start talking about the reasons why we should outsource. And ultimately, hopefully, we should finish by the end of the week. Everybody have a great weekend, folks. You bet. Have a good one.